Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we are looking at international trade, and things are getting pretty heated between Canada and the U.S.
Yeah, trade wars, they're a thing.
Yeah, and we've got a video summary with some insights on this whole escalating situation with these tariffs, and it's pretty fascinating how quickly things can change.
Right. Seems like just yesterday, things were all good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Good.
let's take a look at what happened. So the U.S. put tariffs on Canadian imports,
Yeah.
and, well, Canada didn't just sit there, right? They hit back with their own tariffs on U.S. goods.
Yeah, tit for tat, classic trade war stuff. But I think it's important to remember these tariffs, they're not just random.
Right. There's got to be some strategy behind it.
Exactly. Like the video pointed out, they're usually about protecting industries within a country or trying to get a better deal in trade negotiations. The U.S. said they were concerned about Canadian industries like steel and aluminum, said there was unfair competition.
Okay, so it's kind of like each side trying to flex their muscles a bit.
Yep. Yeah, you could say that. But it's not just a game. There are real-world impacts here.
Oh, absolutely. The Bank of Canada is already saying there could be a recession in Canada because of this.
Yeah, and that's not good, especially for sectors like manufacturing and agriculture in Canada that do so much business with the U.S.
I mean, I get the concept of a recession, but what does that actually mean for people?
Well, think about a factory in Canada. Let's say they make parts for cars, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now those parts become more expensive for American companies because of the tariffs. So what do?
They look for cheaper parts.
Exactly. Maybe they start buying from somewhere else. Then that factory in Canada, they have to lay off workers, families are
They
struggling.
got domino effect.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the Canadian dollar weakens.
Right, which makes everything more expensive for Canadians.
Exactly. It's like a double whammy.
So while the politicians are up there, making these moves, it's the everyday people who end up paying the price.
You got it. And speaking of politicians, Prime Minister Trudeau's in a tough spot.
Oh, for sure. He's got to stand up for Canada, but also try to prevent things from getting worse.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. And you know what's interesting? This isn't just a Canadian problem.
Right. It seems like everyone's getting involved.
The video mentions how American lawmakers and businesses, some of them are worried too, especially those who rely on Canadian imports.
So it's hurting them as well.
Yeah, those tariffs make their costs go up, could even lead to job losses in the U.S. too.
It's kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face, isn't it? I mean, does anyone really win in a trade war?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a complex issue, and this Canada-U.S. thing, it's just part of a bigger picture.
Right, it's like this global trade war brewing.
Exactly. The U.S. has those tariffs on Mexico and China, too, and they're both thinking about how to retaliate. We're talking about potentially disrupting the entire global supply chain.
Wow, so those new headphones I was thinking about buying, maybe I should do that now before they become impossible to find.
That's not a bad idea. A global trade war could mean higher prices and fewer products available.
Okay, so we've covered this trade war, but the video also mentions something else that's happening in Canada, right? Jordan's Principle.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big economic and political stuff, but we can't forget about the other important issues.
Exactly, like making sure vulnerable communities are taken care of.
Jordan's principle is all about making sure First Nations children have access to essential services, but there are concerns about the program. Allegations of money not being used properly, that's really worrying.
Yeah, that's a huge problem, especially for a program that's supposed to help children.
Exactly. It shows how these big political and economic things can overshadow other crucial issues. We have to pay attention to everything that's happening.
Right, it's all connected in a way.
In today's world, it's more important than ever to understand all these complex issues. Something that seems like a political squabble in another country, it can actually impact our own communities, even our own lives.
That's true, it's all connected. And it's a lot to take in.
It is, and I think that's why it's so important to stay informed. Read the news, try to understand different points of view, and think about how these global events might affect you where you live.
That's great advice. This deep dive has been, well, eye-opening, to say the least. Trade wars, they're not just about numbers. They have real consequences for people, businesses, and even for vulnerable groups who need our help.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the world is a complex and interconnected place. What might seem far away can actually hit very close to home.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you'll keep exploring these issues and thinking about how they impact your own world.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.